This isn't just a simple tale of good versus evil. It's a narrative packed with strange details, questionable motives, and a victory so improbable it makes you wonder, what really happened that day? Could there be hidden truths beneath the surface of this famous account? We're going to dissect every layer, examining not just the heroic narrative, but the subtle clues that point towards something far more complex, something that perhaps modern understanding struggles to fully grasp. Before we dive deep into this rabbit hole, remember to check out our other videos exploring ancient mysteries and forgotten history. And consider joining the Celestial Chronicles community by hitting that subscribe button. Our story unfolds in a specific place, a valley known as the Valley of Elah. Picture the scene: two massive forces, ancient armies gathered for war. On one side, the Philistines. The text describes them as the enemies of the biblical God, worshippers of pagan gods. A powerful, feared group in that time. They occupy one side of this valley, a strategic position. Across from them, on the other side, are the Israelites. They are presented as the servants of the biblical God, and they are led by their king, Saul. Now, King Saul was notable himself. The Bible says he was the tallest man in all of Israel at that time. You'd think, leading his army, he'd be a formidable presence, a natural leader ready to face any threat. But something happens that changes everything. Standing with the Philistine army, a single figure emerges. A man, but described in ways that suggest something more, something almost unnatural. Some say a 9-foot monster of a man. He hails from Gath, a city known for its strong warriors. The description is chillingly detailed. He wears a helmet made of bronze. His body is covered in a heavy coat of scale armor, also made of bronze. He carries a bronze javelin slung on his back. His name is Goliath. He is not just tall, he is immense, fierce and menacing. The sheer size of him is beyond typical human scale. Think about that for a second. 9 feet tall, clad head to toe in heavy metal. How much would that armor weigh? We're talking hundreds of pounds of bronze. The javelin, described elsewhere as being like a weaver's beam, suggests an enormous weapon. This wasn't just a big guy. This was a walking, talking fortress. The impact of his presence is immediate and profound. The text states that his presence in the valley dismayed Saul's forces. They were struck with both fear and awe. Awe, yes, because of his incredible size, but intense fear. Fear that paralyzes an entire army. This wasn't just the fear of facing a strong opponent. This was the fear of facing something seemingly invincible, something that felt outside the realm of normal warfare. Why this extreme reaction? Was it just his size? Or was there something else about Goliath? Something in his demeanor, his reputation? Or perhaps even his gear that suggested a threat beyond simple physical strength? The Philistines were known to be technologically advanced for their time, especially in working with iron, as mentioned later in the original text. While Goliath is described with bronze, does his sheer scale combined with advanced craftsmanship hint at a level of preparation or capability the Israelites simply couldn't match? Was this a calculated move by the Philistines to deploy a shock weapon? A single terrifying unit designed purely to break the enemy's will before the fight even started. It certainly seems to have worked, at least initially. The Valley of Elah became a valley of shadows, not just from the hills, but from the fear cast by this giant. What held the Israelite army, supposedly under divine protection, in such a grip of terror? Let us know your initial thoughts in the comments below. Could Goliath represent a different kind of threat than history typically records? For a staggering 40 days, this scene repeats. Goliath, this enormous figure, would march out from the Philistine lines towards the Israelite camp. He wouldn't attack directly. Instead, he would use his booming voice, a voice that must have carried across the valley, to openly mock the Israelite army. He didn't just mock them, he specifically denounced their God. He would yell, essentially, "Who are you relying on? Your God is weak. None of you are formidable. None of you can face me." Imagine the psychological toll of this. 40 days. Every morning perhaps, or maybe throughout the day, this giant comes out and shouts insults, challenging their faith, challenging their manhood, challenging their very existence as a free people. This wasn't just pre-battle trash talk. It was a sustained campaign of psychological warfare designed to chip away at the morale of the Israelite soldiers, to make them feel utterly helpless and abandoned, even by their own deity. Goliath wasn't just waiting. He was wearing them down, day by day, insult by insult. He knew the fear he inspired. He used it as his primary weapon. He wasn't just fighting a physical battle. He was fighting a battle for the hearts and minds of the Israelite army, trying to convince them they were already defeated. After these 40 days of relentless taunting, Goliath ups the ante. He grows tired of just waiting for them to cower. He wants a resolution, but perhaps one that avoids a messy, unpredictable full-scale battle. And here's where the challenge gets specific, almost like a formal, ancient duel proposed under specific rules. He offers them an ultimatum. He tells the Israelites to send a single man to face him, just one, and the outcome of that single combat would determine the fate of the entire conflict. The winner's side would hold dominion, meaning they would rule over the losers. It was a winner-take, all scenario based on the strength of one champion against another. This offer sounds simple, almost honorable, in a strange, brutal way. It would spare the lives of countless soldiers. But to the Israelite army, it sent even more panic through their ranks. Why? Because it shifted the burden. Instead of fighting together as a unit, relying on their numbers and formation, one man would have to bear the horror of facing Goliath's overwhelming strength alone. And who was expected to step up? The text implies it should have been King Saul. He was the leader, the tallest man in Israel, though still shorter than Goliath. He was armed, supposedly ready for battle. He was the most viable candidate, based on traditional leadership roles and physical presence. But Saul hesitated. Despite having his armor on, the text says he would not come out to face Goliath. This is another point that begs questioning. Why the hesitation from the king? Was his fear so great it paralyzed his duty? Or was there something else holding him back? Did he sense that facing Goliath wasn't just about strength, but something more complex he wasn't prepared for? Was there a hidden weakness in Saul, a lack of faith, or something else entirely? His inaction creates a void, a desperate need for someone, anyone, to answer this impossible challenge. The stage is set, the terms are clear, and the silence from the Israelite side is deafening. What do you think was going through Saul's mind during those 40 days? Was he looking for a sign, or simply trying to avoid the inevitable? Share your theories below. Into this tense, fearful stalemate steps an unlikely figure, David. The text describes him as a mere boy. He was certainly not built like a warrior. No extraordinary height, no rippling muscles, and absolutely no reputation as a fierce. He was, as the text notes, more suited to tending to the sheep. David was the son of a man named Jesse from Bethlehem. Jesse had 8 sons, and the 3 oldest were already with King Saul's army in the valley. David, being the youngest, had a different job. His father tasked him with bringing food and supplies to his brothers, essentially acting as a delivery boy to the front lines. On this particular occasion, David is sent by Jesse to bring provisions to his brothers and see how they are doing. He arrives at the camp and finds the 2 armies locked in their strange standoff, facing each other across the valley, with Goliath's taunts likely echoing at that very moment. As David tries to locate his brothers, he hears Goliath's usual tirade of insults, specifically aimed at the Israelite God and the army. He also notices the reaction of the soldiers, murmuring in panic. The fear is palpable, infectious. He starts to learn from the panic mutterings around him. He hears about King Saul's desperation to get rid of Goliath. And critically, he hears about the reward being offered to anyone who can defeat the giant. The text is specific here. King Saul would do anything for the man who could slay him. This included giving the man his own daughter in marriage and exempting his entire family from paying taxes, a significant financial and social gain. Now, here is a moment ripe for alternative interpretation. A point that sparks debate about David's true motive. The text states that after hearing about the reward, liking the sound of all this, it spurred David into action. This phrasing is fascinating. It's as saying the reward was the primary spark. Some analysts look at this and suggest that David's immediate willingness to face Goliath might have been less about pure faith or innate bravery, and more about the incredible benefits being offered. Before hearing about the reward, the text doesn't show David being particularly concerned about Goliath or compelled to fight it. Only after the financial and social incentives are mentioned does he declare his intention. Could David's actions, at least initially, have been one of self-interest, a calculated gamble to drastically improve his social standing and wealth? This perspective contrasts sharply with the traditional view, which sees David's motivation as purely spiritual, driven by outrage at Goliath's insult to God and absolute faith in divine protection. Most religious interpretations agree that David was acting according to God's will, and that earlier events, like David being secretly anointed by the prophet Samuel to replace Saul, show he was already chosen for a special purpose. From this viewpoint, the reward was secondary, perhaps even irrelevant, or simply God arranging circumstances to bring David to the forefront. But the text does specifically link his being spurred into action with him, liking the sound of all this, the reward. It opens the door to questioning, was David's faith the sole driver, or was it amplified, perhaps even initiated by the promise of riches, power, and royal connection? It forces us to ask if our heroes always act for purely altruistic reasons, or if personal gain can sometimes intersect with destiny. What do you believe was David's primary motivation when he first heard about Goliath? And pure faith, calculated opportunity, or a complex mix of both? Share your thoughts in the chat. David, this young shepherd boy, goes to his brothers and the soldiers around him and declares his intention. He will fight Goliath. As you can imagine, his brothers are not supportive. They scold him, accusing him of being arrogant and neglecting his duties just to come see the battle. They clearly don't take his declaration seriously. But somehow word gets to King Saul. The boy is claiming he can fight the giant. David is brought before the king. This must have been a strange scene. The tall, armored king surrounded by his fearful advisors, facing a young, probably nervous, shepherd boy who looked utterly unqualified for the task. King Saul is far from impressed. His reaction is one of disbelief and dismissal. He tells David directly, "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." It's a practical, logical assessment. Goliath has been training his entire life. David has been tending sheep. From a military standpoint, Saul sees zero chance of success. Sending David out would be suicide. And crucially, if David lost, which Saul was sure he would, the Israelites would lose the war, becoming servants to the Philistines according to Goliath's term. Furthermore, the text mentions it likely didn't sit right with Saul to send an innocent boy to face a guaranteed massacre. There's a hint of moral reservation here, perhaps mixed with the strategic fear of losing everything. But David is insistent. He refuses to back down. This is where he recounts his experiences fighting wild animals. He tells Saul, "Your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and killed him." Think about story for a moment. A boy catching a lion or a bear by his beard, or throat jaw area and killing it with his bare hands or perhaps a shepherd's staff. These are incredibly dangerous animals. Lions and bears are powerful predators, while shepherds in that era were certainly tough and had to defend their flocks. This account sounds extraordinary. Is this presented as evidence of David's incredible natural strength and skill, honed by necessity? Or is he implying something else? David continues, explaining how he achieved these seemingly impossible feats. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." He attributes these victories directly to God's intervention. He is telling Saul that his success against Goliath won't come from his own strength, but from the same divine power that protected him from predators. Saul, struck by David's conviction, and perhaps desperate for any option, agrees. He dresses David in his own royal tunic, puts his own bronze coat of armor on him, and gives him his sword. Saul is trying to equip David in the traditional way, giving him the best protection and weapon available to a king. But another strange moment occurs when David tries to move around in the armor, and with the sword, he finds them cumbersome, too heavy, too restrictive. He removes them. He opts to fight Goliath without any armor and without Saul's sword. Why refuse the king's gear? The common explanation is practicality. David wasn't used to heavy armor. It would slow him down. He was used to moving freely as a shepherd. But could there be a deeper meaning here? Some interpretations suggest this is David rejecting reliance on human strength and conventional military tools, choosing instead to rely solely on God and the simple tools he was familiar with. It's a symbolic act of faith. However, from a different angle, his refusal of the armor is baffling from a strategic perspective. Facing a giant with heavy weapons, going in completely unprotected seems not just brave, but reckless to the point of madness. Was David being divinely guided to do this? Or did he possess a different kind of armor, an unconventional defense or agility that made the heavy bronze unnecessary or even counterproductive to his plan? His defiance of military logic and his reliance on his shepherd's tools add another layer of mystery. He is choosing a path that no military strategist would ever recommend. What do you think was the significance of David refusing Saul's armor and sword? Was it a sign of faith, strategic insight, or something else entirely? Let us know your theories in the chat. Despite Saul's protests, likely seeing this as a suicidal mission, David remains calm. He goes out into the valley, but before facing Goliath, he makes a stop. He calmly selects 5 small, smooth stones from the ground, perhaps from a stream bed nearby. He puts them in his shepherd's bag. With his sling in hand, he walks out into the middle of the valley, approaching Goliath. Goliath's reaction is much like Saul's. Initially, he's not impressed. He's offended. This isn't the mighty warrior he expected. This is a boy, lightly equipped. He probably laughs. "Am I a dog," he shouts, "that you come at me with sticks?" The sling, to him, was just a simple, almost childish weapon, not a tool of war. He curses David by his gods and promises to kill him easily and feed his flesh to the animals. But David's calm demeanor holds firm. He doesn't flinch. He responds with incredible boldness and conviction. He tells Goliath that he will lose. He will die, and that with the power of his God, David will cut off Goliath's head and feed his corpse to the animals. He declares that Goliath will pay for his insults against God and Israel. This is a powerful moment of verbal counterattack, not based on physical threat, but on absolute certainty in a higher power. Goliath is furious. He moves to rush David, and here's where the action happens incredibly fast. To Goliath's surprise, David doesn't stand and wait. He runs towards Goliath to meet him. As David runs, he reaches into his bag, pulls out one of the stones. He puts it in his sling and swings it with all his might. Slings, by the way, were surprisingly powerful weapons. Used by skilled individuals, they could launch stones at speeds comparable to early firearms, with enough force to kill or severely injure. David, as a shepherd, would have been highly skilled with the sling, using it to protect his sheep from predators or guide them. But was this just a skilled shepherd, using a simple weapon? The text says the stone was slung with such speed that it sank into Goliath's forehead. Sank into. That implies incredible force, not just enough to stun, but to penetrate bone. Was David's skill level with the sling beyond exceptional? perhaps almost supernatural? Or was the stone itself somehow unique? Could the very act of launching it have been subtly aided by an unseen force, as David claimed God helped him with the lion and bear? And what about the forehead? Was this a specific, perhaps known, weak point in Goliath's seemingly impenetrable armor? His face was likely exposed beneath the helmet, but striking that exact spot with such force while running towards him is an incredible feat of accuracy and power. The stone hits its mark. Goliath, the towering giant, collapses. He falls face down to the ground. The valley, which had been filled with taunts and fear, is suddenly hushed into complete silence. Everyone is watching, stunned in awe. David, the boy, stands victorious over the fallen giant. But the story isn't quite over. David doesn't just leave him there. He runs up to the motionless Goliath, takes the giant's own sword, a sword he just minutes ago refused to use when it was offered to him by Saul, and uses it to cut off Goliath's head. This act is gruesome but significant. It's the ultimate proof of Goliath's defeat and ensures he won't rise again. It also shows David, the boy, capable of a final, decisive and brutal act of war. Now let's revisit some of those lingering questions. The 5 stones. If David had absolute faith that God would ensure victory, and that God helped the stone kill the giant, why did he need 4 spares? Was it a sign that even with immense faith, a shred of human doubt remained? Was he planning for multiple shots in case the first one missed or wasn't enough? Or do the 5 stones have some symbolic meaning lost to us? This detail continues to puzzle those who seek a purely faith-based explanation for the victory. Furthermore, the speed, accuracy, and impact of the stone are remarkable. Was it just exceptional skill? Or was there something more involved? Could the seemingly simple sling be a more effective weapon than we give it credit for against a slow, heavily armored target? This confrontation, so brief and decisive, is the core of the mystery. Was it a divine miracle? An act of God empowering a faithful servant? Or a combination of incredibly precise skill? A lucky hit on a vulnerable spot? And perhaps Goliath being overconfident and unprepared for David's unconventional approach? The traditional narrative says it was God, but the details allow for other interpretations, suggesting that perhaps human skill, strategic cunning, running forward, and even a bit of luck played a role alongside, or instead of, direct divine intervention. What does Goliath's fall tell you about where true strength comes from? Share your thoughts and interpretations in the comments. With Goliath dead, the Philistine army sees their champion fall and panics. Text says they turn to flee. Their morale, which Goliath's presence had held together, shattered instantly. They broke ranks and ran. Unfortunately for them, the Israelite army, finally galvanized by David's incredible victory, chased after them. They pursued the fleeing Philistines, attacked their camps, and inflicted heavy casualties. It was a major victory for the Israelites, shifting the balance of power in the region. This victory was crucial. The Philistines had been a major enemy for Israel for centuries, from roughly 1200 BC to 1000 BC. They weren't just a minor threat. As mentioned earlier, they were skilled metalworkers, especially with iron, which allowed them to forge superior weapons and build powerful chariots. These chariots could run down enemies in open battle and cover large distances quickly, giving the Philistines a significant military advantage. However, the text also notes a key point about the battlefield. The valley. It was rocky, uneven. This harsh landscape was a disadvantage for the Philistines. Chariots wouldn't be very effective there, and orderly formations of infantry would be difficult to maintain. This geographical detail helps explain some of the earlier mysteries. It explains why Goliath and the Philistines didn't just rush the Israelites in the 40 days of taunting. They were cautious. They understood that whoever attacked first in that terrain would be at a disadvantage, because they could be easily overrun or scattered by the defending force, taking advantage of the landscape. The terrain couldn't facilitate organized movement required for a full-scale charge. This is likely why Goliath opted for a one-on-one battle. He knew a full army battle might be a stalemate or even disadvantageous to his technically superior force in that specific valley. In a one-on-one, he believed his size and strength made him virtually invincible, regardless of the terrain. He couldn't imagine losing to any warrior, let alone a shepherd boy. His absolute confidence in his physical dominance was the foundation of his strategy. But David's perspective was different. He didn't see Goliath as an unbeatable monster. As the text puts it, David saw him as just a mortal man created by God, just like any other. More importantly, David believed Goliath was defying God with his pagan worship and insult. This belief, David felt God would not allow Goliath to win. This brings us back to the core interpretations. The traditional view emphasizes David's unyielding belief in God's serves as a powerful example of faith. By placing your trust in God, anything can be achieved, even defeating a giant. God works miracles through those who believe. David's victory is seen as proof that faith can overcome physical limitations and impossible odds. However, the alternative analysis, fueled by the curious details, presents other possibilities. Was it faith alone? Was it also exceptional skill? David's mastery of the sling was far beyond average, a skill underestimated by Goliath and the Israelites. He was a deadly marksman. 2. Strategic thinking. David recognized the vulnerability of Goliath's exposed forehead and the potential of his weapon against heavy armor. He understood that running forward countered Goliath's reach advantage. 3. Goliath's weakness. Goliath's arrogance made him careless. He didn't perceive the sling as a real threat and was perhaps slow-moving due to his size and armor, making him a target. The 5 stones, a lingering symbol of potential doubt, preparation for failure, or a backup plan that points away from absolute certainty in a single miraculous intervention. The reward. The initial spark of motivation that perhaps intersected with or even preceded his declaration of faith. Could the story be a blend of these? Could God have given David the exceptional skill, or guided his strategic mind, or simply presented him with the opportunity? Or could it be that the story, while told as a miracle of faith, actually contains the elements of a highly skilled, courageous individual taking advantage of a unique situation, with the faith providing the necessary conviction, but not necessarily a supernatural push for the story? The phrase, David and Goliath, now universally represents an underdog situation, where the smaller, weaker contender overcomes a much bigger, stronger adversary. It has taken on a life of its own, a symbol of hope for anyone facing overwhelming challenges. But the original account, when examined closely, holds its secret. The nature of David's motivation, the reason for the 5 stones, the precise mechanics of the kill, Saul's inaction, Goliath's 40-day taunt, these details invite us to look beyond the simple narrative and ask deeper questions about what truly unfolds when an improbable victory occurs. Was it a pure miracle, or the result of hidden strengths, forgotten skills, and perhaps a different kind of power at play? History teaches us not only what we have found, but also what remains undiscovered, both in the world and within ourselves. And the journey to understanding the secrets hidden within ancient texts, like the incredible account of David and Goliath, continues. What aspects of this story do you find most mysterious? Let us know in the comments below.